I'm in it to make the customer feel great about what they do. We've got a churn rate of 0.5%. We've got a lot of happy customers at eWAY, and we want to keep it that way. For me, the number one reason I picked Salesforce was, how could I grow this thing? What could I plug in here and do this and make it bigger? And it's just about trying to find that product that fits your need. You start off in Excel if you're lucky. When you're on a platform like Salesforce, you're not doing that because you're not even worrying about that anymore. Buy it, connect it, plug it in, make it work. So for us to onboard another 10,000 customers in a day, it's totally doable.
Your email address? Yep.
Our 17,000 customers are all in Salesforce. The amount of data that you can put in Salesforce is incredible. We have the Sales Cloud and we have the Service Cloud, and it's all Salesforce. So we're not making the customer care reps jump in and out of different platforms. When I look at the sales guy's life, and it's the same with customer care, right? It's everything, it's about time. So I constantly talk to them about time, and if half your life is doing something that has no result, then what's the point? I use Salesforce One, so if I need to know about a customer, wherever I am, I'll type it in, find the details about that customer and know exactly what it is. My managers use it for reports. Previously I was logging into a web browser and trying to do fat fingers and stretch the screen out and go, what's that report? And a lot of that's been solved for me with Salesforce One.
Make it easier for the rest of the team.
We also use Salesforce Live Chat. So between chat and self-serve, it's just reduced tickets, even within the first day of going live, dramatically. And for us, where we want to get to is where Salesforce absolutely is at, where it's quite often not Salesforce answering the questions, it's actually Salesforce customers to answer your questions. And then now we're looking at implementing video chat to just give that extra level of service. What Pardot gives us, and where the sales guys are really smashing it, is where you look at the insights of what activities the customer's actually doing. And what that means for us is we're going to get a much better conversion rate because we're focusing on their activity, their interest. That's everything in sales. So apart from data, I'm also obsessed with getting rid of the friction from our business. We use force.com. We've got 3 million characters of code, and that's our entire sign-up process. And that sign-up process is a frictionless process to get a merchant account. And as the data goes in field by field, that's getting written back in real time to Salesforce. And using the tools like we have in Salesforce, it is totally about the customer. So from just not the sales side, but then on the service side, putting it all together and then putting marketing over the top of it, I mean, that's just beautiful, right? And then with analytics down the bottom, it's a crazy thing what we've built at eWAY. If our customers are growing and we're growing, it's just happy days for everyone.
All right, let's put our hands together and welcome Matt onto the stage.
G'day.
G'day. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
I actually wanted to take you back to that looked like a very polished and successful company. I want to take it back to the beginning days, and I think we have a slide with some photos of those beginning days.
That'll be embarrassing.
When the company looked like that, rather than the video. You know, one reason we started the Sunrise was to really tell the untold stories of Australian technology entrepreneurship, and would love to sort of start with how you came to eWAY, how you started, and the problems you chose when starting, and you know, those beginning days.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. That thing there's called a pin pad, and it plugged into a computer, and at the time it was a modem, so it was like 20 years ago. And I bought one of those pin pads, and it cost me, I think it was something like 28 grand. And I could have 15 customers on it, and I was selling it for $27 a month, so it didn't really add up. But I didn't really care. So I did that through St. George Bank. It was the only place I connected. And the way I started the whole thing was there was a company called Gray's Advertising who used to get stuck on bits of code, and I would help them write a little bit of code. And they were doing something for a company called Medibank Private, and they couldn't figure out the payment bit to talk to the PIN pad. And I wrote that little bit of code for them, and then I thought, there's a lot of payment gateways out there, and they're all kind of crap. So I thought I could do it better. So I wrote a bit more code and turned it into a gateway, and then there was a magazine going back 20 years ago called Net Guide, which is a little tiny magazine. I put an ad in there, and then there was, I had my first customer, and I used to get an SMS every time I got a customer. At one point I had to turn it off because I got too many SMSs. But they were called Max 86, and they were selling bicycle parts. And that's how it all started. And
take us, so what year was this? Like
it was like 20 years ago.
Paint a picture
20 years ago.
The internet, and even, the internet just coming into the fore, and BBS systems and telephone lines.
I had an ISDN line in my house that was 64K. That was the connection that I had for my house. The PIN pads were dial-up, so they had to dial up to the bank, which took 30 seconds to then do the payment. Once it was connected, it could be faster. And at that time, I asked St George Bank to give me the connection because I needed a bank. And then I told everyone that all the other banks are crap because St George is the only bank. That's because that was the only bank I had, which worked well. And St George gave us lots of leads. And then over the years, I just got more banks. So that the PIN pads I got, I ended up getting ANZ, and then eventually CBA made a PIN pad, and Westpac and NAB told me to go jump, and that going jump went on for many, many years. And eventually I then connected to a company called First Data, which gave me an IP connection, which meant all the servers disappeared. But at the time in my house, I had 40 servers and 10 phone lines, and I was single. No surprise there, with so many computers and everything else. And the power would go down, and I'd be ripping the generator to start it, going, yeah, a technician will fix it shortly. So it was a whole lot of pain to get where it was. I'd be buying all those servers for like a couple of dollars, then pulling all the parts out, whatever I could, just to make the servers work.
How do you, knowing you live in that house with the servers, how do you get a bank like St George to say yes? Do you walk into a branch, or how do you, and particularly that,
I filled out a form online, and I posted it to them, I think is what it was, and they said yes. And they had, at that time, St George had the idea that they didn't want to sell payments, they just wanted partners. And that was amazing. So what I learned from that was that if you don't have a channel, then it's very hard to exist. So, and St George was my first channel, and then I ended up getting other banks as other channels, and then by some instance, someone mentioned to me about a shopping cart, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea, and there was one called Easy Merchant. I was 30-something at the time. I didn't have a driver's license, so I got someone to drive me to Sydney, a mate. And I met Easy Merchant and then convinced them to connect to me. And then I had my first shopping cart, and also had my first bank. So then I had both sides of it. And then eventually I ended up having a couple hundred shopping carts. And then I had all the banks in Australia, all the banks in New Zealand, a bunch of banks in the UK, and some banks in Asia. And by the end of it, we were processing 6 billion, which is a fairly big number, a year. And we had 25,000 customers.
Talk about, we've sort of talked about today with various speakers the idea of a growing ambition, and how an ambition's not this, flat thing that you lock in before you start the company, and how it sort of grows with time. What were the moments where you realized, firstly, that it was working, secondly, that you should move out of your house and start hiring employees, and, the moments where you knew that you had done something great, and almost that inevitable sense of a company being created?
Well, the moving out was easy because I had so many neighbours complaining because I had 6 staff at the time and there was cars everywhere. So I just got to that point that was ridiculous being in a house.
When did you hire your first person? What kind of revenue were you doing, and what decision did you make to?
Not much revenue. And what I ended up doing, because I had some guys that were just helping me part-time, so I just did everything. I didn't get any investment. So I had 50 grand in the bank that I saved because I was contracting to the government. I didn't get any money off anyone. I had lots of people over the years try and give me money, and I just did it myself little bit by little bit. And it's crazy because I don't really feel like there was a point where it went, yeah, wow. But like if I look at that video, I go, oh, it's a nice office. That's pretty good. 6 billion's a good number. But I didn't really feel like there was a point, because it was always, when you start something, like everyone, I thought, oh, this will be massive. And at the time, 20 years ago, a current affair was more about, if you put your card on the internet, you're an idiot. as opposed to now where it's, not that I watch a current affair, but more about how great shopping is online and everyone should do something online.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't really have one moment, but I guess I had a couple of pivots. One of them was when I met Rod from Xero, and I connected up to Xero, and we moved from shopping carts to accounting and doing payments in invoices. And then from that point on, just lots of things suddenly became payments, and that was a very interesting moment and a very interesting pivot. And then the other one I had where we were like a payment gateway, so we never actually touched anyone's money. And then we moved into merchant services where we were taking over that risk part from the bank. And what that meant, we took away a whole bunch of process from the bank that would normally, I don't know if anyone's got a merchant account. I'm sure lots of people have got a merchant account here. The process of getting it was very long. So we squashed it by taking over those processes from the bank. And that's when our numbers started going up.
Talk about the rise of the internet. You know, in many ways, you started the company when the internet was an afterthought or a toy, academic.
ISDN.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what ISDN is, but yeah.
Talk about how the success of the internet and people putting their credit cards online, how that has surprised you both, you know, on the upside and how, you know, fundamental it's become to society.
I think it's got a crazy, still long way to go. You know, you can't just walk to your TV and flick your wrist and buy something. So I think it's still got a long way to go. But I used to always still meet people who are going, oh yeah, I'm thinking about it. Like there's still a ton of people out there, and everyone would have that experience. You go to buy something off someone and you've got to download their form and send it back to them, or they don't have any way you can buy off them. So that it's still got massive, massive ways to go. I didn't mean to exit when I did. Yeah.
We'll talk about that a bit later. Let's talk about building a company in Canberra. You know, the idea of you can only build a company in Silicon Valley, or if you're in Australia, you have to build a company in Sydney or Melbourne. Talk about building a company in Canberra and the pros and cons, and particularly the advantages of doing so.
I think you can build a company anywhere. I don't think it matters where it is. So what it's about is just getting the right people around you and the people that believe in what you believe in. The hardest thing for me is when I was starting and everyone would have this thing where you're going on a journey and you want someone to do it, and then the parents of the kid that I've just hired would say, no, you should go on the public service because he's not going to be around. Everyone thought I was not going to be around forever. I think probably right to even the end, the people go, you're still going to be here tomorrow? But it's this belief of trying to get people to really believe in you that you are going to be around, and it's not a 5-second thing. So convincing people of that is always a hard thing, because once you kind of work for the government, it seems to be this easy thing for life. That's all you do. And half the people in Canberra work for the government. So that was difficult, but I like Canberra. I think it's a great place. And there was a point in time where I could have moved the company anywhere, but I just chose to have it where it was. It's lifestyle. It's easy. And I wanted something that was easy for family, easy for the business. But I don't think it matters where you are. It's just if you're with the right people, and you know whether you're with the right people, and if you've got people that are the wrong people, then you should get rid of those people. But make sure you're with the right people, the people that believe.
Talk a little bit about some of the early customers who pushed you in terms of product development and you know, their story being intertwined with your own success, and you know, paint a picture of who some of those early customers.
I had 25,000 customers. There was people like Catch of the Day, Kogan that would push what we did. But I guess in the very beginning there was a company called Easy DVD. We used to buy DVDs and they would post them to you a while back. That company at the time said, well, we want to store the credit card, and that was one of their points of difference, and we'll bill you when it ships. And all the other gateways went, oh, we don't store the card data, but everyone stored the card data. But everyone just had this thing that they said they never stored the card data, but everyone stored the card data. So I said, I'll store the card data. And then we then built a whole product around that for them, which really helped them become really successful. And the money that I used to get off them, and everyone will get to that point when you're starting up, that one customer, I never told them that, but that one customer paid for everything. And that was great, because I just knew that one customer, they're just going to pay for everything. But by the end, I didn't want anything like that, and my biggest customer was Catch, and that they were 1 point something% of my revenue, which is really good when you've got 25,000 customers. Because I heard so many times of companies where they have that one client, 20%, that client's gone, that business is gone, or 40%. I always want to spread it.
Talk about, obviously, dealing with a lot of money, the risk of security and how you create a culture such that that is taken in the highest regard. And I know we talked a little bit before about the nefarious activities of the internet, and I'd imagine you were the honeypot for some of the hackers out there and a target. But talk about how you built that culture internally, and then some of the things you think worked in terms of building that trust and that impeccable record over a number of decades.
Well, security for me was very serious, and I just hired a whole bunch of external professionals to help me with it. And then internally, I'd hardly let anyone even near it. And there was 3 people that could have access, and I was one of them, and I forgot how to even do it. So it wasn't going to be me. So it was very, very squashed, and we had a lot of professionals that helped us. And that was it was very important, because if we ever had a breach, it was just over, and we all knew that if it happened, it would be over. So we had hundreds of millions of credit cards, but we never had any issues on anything.
And talk about, you started off, Australian merchants accepting Australian credit cards, and then your sort of lens widened to all around the world. Talk about when you did that and kind of what you were feeling at the time, and then how similar or dissimilar expanding into other countries became.
Yeah, so 20 years ago, I just thought about Australia. But if I really thought about it, I should have thought about the world first and Australia second, which is what I'm doing now with my new company. So for me, the way I did in Australia, I just focused on St. George, and then once I had all the banks, it was done. So there wasn't much more to do in Australia other than just get more market share, but I said I had all the banks, so that was done. And then I just kept on getting more shopping carts, so that was kind of done. So it was like, what else to do? So I think I went to New Zealand for a holiday, and then I met a bank, and they went, yeah, okay. And then then I thought, well, I'll meet more banks, and then they went, yeah, okay. And similar sort of thing for the UK. Austrade actually set up a meeting in the UK, so I got introduced to the right level, which is much harder in the UK. But I always found that traction overseas was much more difficult, and I don't know why. Just maybe it was the competition or whatever, but I could never really kick it on in those other countries as much as what we did here.
We had a Salesforce video at the beginning, and talk about what you've learnt from that company and how they've built Salesforce, and then also let's talk about you've taken the Pledge 1%, and actually how we met was through Scott, and via Pledge 1%. Talk about why that was important to you and the company, and the effect it had over time.
So Salesforce, I love Salesforce. And it's clear from the video that I love Salesforce. I wouldn't have had eWAY if it wasn't for Salesforce. And I and ahed about putting Salesforce on whenever it was. I think it was like close to 10 years ago. And by the end, I only did it because the Salesforce guy hassled me so much. I just thought, all right, damn it, I'll try it. At the time, it was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought. It was dearer than a car, and I didn't even own a car at that time. So it was quite scary for me. But when I did it, my revenue doubled in that first year. And because what it gave me was what I didn't have, which was process. Before I had Excel documents and bits of paper, and no one really knew what the hell they were doing with anything. I was using a help desk software that was free, and it was all crap. So even though I wasn't that good at Salesforce, and it took me multiple goes to get it right, by the end of my journey with Salesforce, I had every product. I'd been to 4 or 5 Dreamforces, and I just learned so much stuff. And I'd go to a Dreamforce, and I'd come back, and then I'd spend days like a mad person writing up on walls about all the ideas that I got. And then we use those ideas of what we were going to build and what we were going to do for that year. And it was all just focused on one thing, which is that video talks about, was just the customer. So like everyone's got customers or trying to get customers, and it was just about what can I do to make it easier for the customer. And that's what I just kept using Salesforce for. So whether it was sales or service or marketing, it was just this constant thing about how do I make it easier. And whether you use Salesforce or something else, it's really important to have a process. because quite often when you're small, you don't have a process. And I think it actually makes you go a lot slower because you don't have a process, and it's hard to get a process, but that whole working on your business is pretty damn important. So it was a big lesson for me. The 1% thing was part of seeing Benny off and what he'd done. He's like donated a hospital or something crazy. I took the pledge with Scott from Atlassian at the Opera House. I'm pointing over there. I don't know where the Opera House is, but roughly over there. It was a good thing. For me, what happened was my second child was born with no nostrils and couldn't breathe, and he then went. I had to put him into a coma, and we flew to hospital from Canberra to Sydney, and we thought he was going to die, and it was a terrible moment for my family. And I stayed at Ronald McDonald House, and anyway, they drilled holes in his nose, and he's all good, and so that's lovely. His name's Edmund. But I felt a debt to Ronald McDonald House. My wife volunteers there one day a week, and as part of me selling eWAY, I set up a foundation with my wife, and I put $1 million into it, and we've just given $30,000 to Ronald McDonald House. And every year, I've got JB Ware doing the investment. That's just going to be money that we're just going to give away forever. So for me, that 1%, I tried to do it at eWAY, but then I got caught up in the deal that I couldn't do it. I'm 100% into it, and I would say to everyone else, you should, when you're in the startup thing, if you don't do it now, it's the perfect time to do it, because if you're not making that much money, what's 1% of it? And then when you're making a lot of money, one day trying to think about giving up 1% of it might do your brain in. But if you start it from the beginning, and just the culture thing, the lift that it can give the staff to know that you're giving back, to give product, and to give cash if you want to. I mean, the cool thing about the 1% is you can do whatever you want to do. You have to do all of them. But I think if you look at the people who have done it, you're really surrounding yourselves with very cool people that are giving back. And 1%'s just a tiny number. So I think it's super cool. And the more people that do it, I think the better the world will be. Imagine if everyone gave 1%. Just all the problems that would just go. And you decide what you give the 1% to. That's why it's good. I give it to Ronald McDonald House. So Ronald McDonald House might mean much to you, but I'm sure there's something that does.
Wonderful. Let's get some questions from the audience. So make sure you ask questions either on Twitter and the app, and we'll get to them shortly. As you said, you did sell the business after such a long journey, and I'd imagine your whole life story being intertwined with eWAY.
Yeah.
Talk about the decision to sell and to now depart the business and to do something afresh. Talk about how you knew it was time to sell, and I'd imagine with success you would have had offers along the way as well, and to why you said no to those other offers.
I had lots of offers along the way, but they were amazing offers of 1 times revenue.
Okay.
And I said to every one of them, but I'll make more the next year. Yeah. Like, but you get it all in one go, and I'm like, yeah, but I'll make more the next year. So I just could never really take those offers of 1 times revenue to mean anything. So the sale, not that I can say too much about it, but I was at a conference called Money 2020 in Vegas, and I met this global company called Global Payments, and they took me out to dinner, and I had a big steak and a bottle of wine, and they said they really liked my company, and I was like, well, okay, well, fair enough. And then they said they'd wanted to pay some crazy multiple, and I went, wow, and I texted my CFO and said how much that is, and I was like, oh, wow. And I was just very shocked, and I'd never had anyone who'd done that before, and I didn't really think about selling it at all, and I thought my kids would be in this business. And then they said to me, do you like Lenny Kravitz? And I used to always like the song, are you going to go my way, you're going to go eWAY? And I went, yeah, I like Lenny. And then they said, oh, there's a private concert that Bain Capital's doing. We might be able to get you into that. And there was like 100 people with Lenny on stage. And I was like, from here with Lenny just going off with these crazy dances. Like, yeah, going to go my eWAY. Lenny was amazing. And then it shows how much I worked. Then Snoop Dogg played, and I didn't even know who Snoop Dogg was. And from then, it was just an amazing experience. We came back, and it was 6 months to do the deal. And I'd never done a deal like that before, and doing that deal is hard. And the hardest thing about doing a deal is that you have to have people off the side who are your important people that know the deal's happening, but they can't tell everyone because I was determined that I wasn't going to bust the company, because in case it didn't happen, I didn't want everyone to worry about their jobs and everything else that they could possibly worry about. So I've got the people off on the side, and then I had to hit targets as part of the projected revenue that I was doing. So not only did I have to hit great targets that I said that I could do, but the people to a side. So that was a major juggling crazy act, and I think it's the hardest I've ever worked, but we did it. And going through every day of when you do a deal like this, and because the company was in the US, you'd get 14 questions, and you might have already answered 7 of them, but you had to answer them again, and you have to do it overnight. Then the next day, another 16 questions, which is the next day, another 26 questions, and so much detail that I didn't even really know about. I learned a lot about the business by just going through how many crazy questions I asked them. And it was hard, but you know, in the end, it was a good thing. And I just thought, for my decision in the end was, I could keep doing this forever, but for what I'm going to get out of it, and I just saw it as a de-risk thing. I didn't want to retire, and that's why I started Spinify. And I thought, why not? So that's why I did it.
Let's talk a little bit about your new company, and after we do, describe what you're doing differently, or what are the sort of mistakes you won't make again.
So Spinify is about leaderboards, and it's about taking data from like Salesforce and then putting it on TV. So in my old office on that video, I had 70 TVs, and I had 6 in my office. So most people don't have 70 TVs in the office, but I was pretty obsessed with data and making it fun. But the product I was using was very difficult. So it was about what I'm trying to do now in this business is, how do I turn something that might be 40 minutes or 4 hours into 40 seconds and really make it easy. The things that I've learned, so in my old world, as you saw a picture of servers, I had 70 servers in the end when I sold eWAY, and the last thing I bought was 2 database servers that cost 350 grand, and I think they were half price. So I was just over servers, so I used this technology, AWS Lambda, and now I have no servers. I have no infrastructure. I pay for code per millisecond that gets executed. So that's been a beautiful thing for me. I guess the other thing that really learning, pivoting what I've been doing, I started with commissions, and now I'm on leaderboards because I just didn't like commissions. It was too difficult. What I've learned from all that stuff is really just, and it's not a new concept, MVP, but I tell you, when you can build anything, you normally do. And this whole thing about it's not ready yet, we'll make it better, And I find now I want to build something, and I'll have the idea in the morning, and I want it ready overnight. So I have guys programming in Canada, I have a guy in Poland, I have guys in Canada, and then I code 24/7 that they all hand over. So, which is also good for me because I don't really stop, so I can talk to the Poland guy, and if I'm up at some stupid time, I can talk to the Canadian guy, or if I get up really early, I talk to the Canadian guy, and then I've constantly got someone doing code, and what it's normally about is just getting that one bit out. And what I'd find at eWAY, if I built something, I'd have a dozen or 20 programmers work on something, but it would take 6 months. And then I'd go, okay, and then it would either work or not work. In most cases, it wouldn't work. I'd go, okay, well, now we'll try another thing for 6 months. So I guess for me, and definitely for you guys, is that you should just try and do the smallest possible thing and get it live. And then do the next smallest possible thing, then get it live. And if that thing works, do a bit more of it. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Get rid of it.
Finish on a question of who are the mentors or other founders that you've watched from afar that you have great respect for, that you've learnt lessons from? Who have been the other founders that have made an impact on your business career?
For me, I mean, I was the sole founder. I wasn't a co-founder. I guess I just looked at all the internet companies around me, and I just knew the guys that were doing stuff, and I didn't really have anyone particular. I said, hey, I want to be like that guy. I guess someone like Benioff is a great role model for what he's done, and that's the whole 1% thing. But I didn't particularly have someone I want to be like him, because I want to be like me. So, and I was very focused on just making a difference. And that was my biggest thing, was making a difference. So for me, it was a great thing that I knew 3.5 million people got something that month because eWAY existed. They got it because they bought something on the internet. So I really believe in when you can do something that actually makes a difference, it's super cool. And I guess there's a thing about business models. So whether you're a business model like eWAY was an oxygen model. So if you don't have it, you're dead. So you've got to have it. Panadol, which is just relieving pain. And then there's jewelry, which is kind of nice and you buy it. I guess you kind of figure out which model you are. And obviously the best one to be is an oxygen one, but normally an oxygen one is solving a very boring problem. And payments is pretty boring. I can't show you a picture of what it looks like. What I kind of was in jewelry, now I'm kind of moving to pain relief, but I really want to get back to oxygen. And you should probably think about your business where you sit in those models and whether you are jewelry, because some jewelry's okay, but it's pretty hard to sell.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Matt.
Thanks.